Ghost stared neutrally at the screen in front of him, waiting for him to take the time the call he was to make to Hunk for his news. At a glance, he could see Chris, standing a few paces away, arms crossed with a neutral expression. Perhaps maybe a little worried, anxiety in his restless eyes. On the other side of the table was Parker, sitting in his chair waiting patiently for a small private meeting to begin. He would be the leader of one of the teams being prepared, depending on how things went. He would be a part of the advanced team, along with Chris and Ghost himself. You didn't go to training today, Chris. Your little fan, Pierce, missed you, Parker joked, smiling slightly as he saw Redfield sigh. The kid's got heart, I'll give him that, but he's got a lot to improve on, Chris said, and Parker grunted slightly. Take it easy on him. He just wants to learn from the best work, which makes him smarter than the rest. If you ask me, by the way, where have you been? Parker asked, watching the screen flash a few times as Ghost entered the password. I went to see Kendo about our weapons. Progress is going well. He looked at Ghost. He's reduced a bit of firepower, but he's made up for the accuracy. Not to mention it, that will give us a large supply of plus P ammunition. Ghost glanced at him, nodding. Good. Remind me to compensate when this is all over, Ghost said, looking at the time. That won't be necessary, will it? These weapons will help everyone. Parker argued and Ghost shrugged. Still, look at it this way as only helping the decent organization in this country, Ghost replied, noticing Chris's gaze on him. So what should we expect from this meeting, he asked, pulling up a chair next to him and sitting down. You said this call was unexpected. I have no idea, but in this case, let's just expect the worst. Hunk won't call me unless it was important information, Ghost replied, leaning back in his chair. What's worse than Wesker joining Umbrella? Parker asked, crossing his arms and grimacing slightly at the thought. Him exchanging information with Umbrella is not only being cured of our poison, but also having finished the virus, Ghost replied, leaning his right arm on the table. Well, damn, I'll never doubt your ability to scare me again, Parker said, and Ghost shrugged at the good humor. And if that were the case, one mistake and we're fucked, Chris said, shaking his head. Exactly, but getting worried or nervous isn't going to change much, Ghost said, glancing at one of them one at a time. Hunk wasn't late or anything, but usually he was always on the call on occasions like these. It was rare that he arrived before his companion. But can we discuss it, can't we? For as far as I know, Albert doesn't have many friends with Umbrella, Parker said, breaking the short moment of silence. No, but money and influence carry a lot of weight. He must have brought it off a few people. In that place, Albert exactly has 0 allies, Ghost said. But we're friends, aren't we? Parker asked in good humor. We're teammates. Friendship isn't the main manual. Well, Ghost replied, as in a typical professional tone. Neither is mask making, Parker joked again, and Ghost arched an eyebrow slightly. Their little conversation was cut short by the image of Hunk. The three men stared at the screen, and to their surprise, instead of a room familiar that they were in at the moment, Hunk appeared to be some kind of helicopter. The loud noise spread throughout the room. The agent had his mask slightly damaged, blood on the back of his clothes. Reaper, what's the situation? Ghost asked, his tone now serious and his eyes icy blue. The situation's gotten a bit complicated. Listen, we had information at the East Slovenia, using biological weapons in Civil War. When we investigated, we discovered that President Savitia Berfikota has formed an alliance with Wesker. They're using 2 variants of Ouroboros, one dominant and the other submissive. They are controlling the smaller infected. Hunk explained quickly, and to the surprise were 2 men in the room. They watched as insect-like creatures seemed to appear out of thin air and attack Reaper, who was quicker and managed to escape the claws that were heading for his neck. Hunk grabbed the shotgun from beside him and fired at the insect-like creature, blowing the fiend's glowing red eye off. They've got a small army of infected around here, Hunk said, looking around the helicopter he was in. Do you need help? Ghost asked seriously. If Hunk was taken by surprise, then he would have imagined how bad the situation was. Negative. Listen, the problem isn't here. We will get the situation under control, okay? They transported some containers on the cargo ship to America. Wesker went along. He plans to release the virus in the Trosopine. Ghost. He's going to infect the whole world, Hunk said, and Freeman grunted almost simultaneously. Ah, crazy bastard, Parker grumbled loudly, watching one of Hunk's men shoot the machine gun attached to the side of the helicopter. Alaya is already working on finding the containers. If you're not ready yet, get ready, and fast. I'll take care of things here and get back to you as soon as possible. Ghost, Hunk said quickly, ending the call there. Ghost sighed in frustration. Sometimes he hated being right. The only word he felt proved to be real. What the hell, Chris? I'm going to warn our men and call O'Brien, but you're the one giving orders, Parker said, looking at him with serious eyes as he waited for words from Redfield, who was just as worried as he was. Holy shit. Put all my men on standby protocol 09. No exceptions. I will warn the organizations. Keep an eye on the containers entering and leaving the country, Chris said, running a hand through his hair. I'll contact my team. I suggest you warn the other states, the BSAA athletes to DSO, contact everyone. Knowing Albert, this is going to be a disaster, Ghost said, his calm, professional tone betraying his slightly nervous eyes. Can we trust them? You said they couldn't be trusted, Parker asked, and Ghost stood up in a huff. And they're not, but they're not stupid enough to ally themselves with Wesker. They'll do what they have to do in that case, Ghost said, and the two-man nodded before hurrying out of the room. Sighing once more, Ghost quickly ran his hand down his neck and began to call out to his team. At the moment he had been created was fast approaching, and he could tell that he was anxious. And that was wrong. He shouldn't be anxious. He should be feeling neutral. As always, focus on eliminating Wesker. He closed his eyes tightly and shook his head. What a great moment to feel invulnerable again. So Hunk must have informed you by now, huh? Ghost almost sighed again when he heard William's voice, and his eyes went to the screen in front of him. He looked fine, apart from his cut on his lower lip and a few bruises on his face, wore a typical dark glasses with a neutral expression. Sir, I'd say, I'm glad to see you, but I'd be lying, he said, and William, as usual, didn't show any kind of reaction. Still trying to challenge me? I thought you've already learned by now, Agent, William said. Ghost just shrugged. He didn't like William, but he respected him enough. What I could say, it's almost automatic now, he replied, and William adjusted his glasses. Regarding the current situation, I'll be a part of the mission. Depending on how things turn out, Albert will soon die and Umbrella will be destroyed, William said, and Ghost nodded understanding. But, the agent asked, many people may die, and when I say many, I really mean it. My brother's union with Umbrella and the President, he is now an army of bioweapons like Lickers, Hunters, Tyrants, and many others with different abilities. The city he decides to attack will suffer colossal damage. I dare say it will be ruined, William explained, and Ghost sighed in regret. Another city in ruins, another outbreak that would kill innocent people. He just hoped it would be the last. It had to be. What if he decides to attack more than one? Ghost asked. He can't. It would take too long to immobilize the containers into different cities. By then we have their location and a chance to stop them, as well as delaying his plan. A large-scale attack with Metropolis is more likely to happen, Williams said, and Ghost stared at him for a few moments. His countenance and serious beneath his mask. His chest was filling with worry. So he might attack here, he concluded, and sighed when he saw William staring at him. This is the headquarters of the BSAA DSO. The city is known for being an important center of operations against bioterrorism, Ghost explained, and William nodded slightly in agreement. It's possible that the only catch one is the safest cities in the country, William said, and Ghost shook his head. They'll never stop Albert before. He probably wants to delay all the organizations from going after him. William agreed. I'll send your team to your location as well, so you'll have some rescue helicopters ready for your call. Ghost shook his head. Send my team, but tell them to stand by. What I want is firepower, Ghost said. Right, I'll send you some of the weapons. They'll be on their way in the rescue helicopters, but be aware of the ammunition is limited. Ghost nodded. I'll only use them on the toughest infected. I just hope the anti-T bullets are worth it. They work. Don't worry about it. Me and a few men are heading towards my brother. I'll keep you and Hunk informed. You'll be able to see my location on your cell phones at times. Elia will contact you shortly, William said, and in the call. Ghost immediately started typing a warning message and sent it to the others. They had to get ready as soon as possible, and that included him too. He also sent a private message to Chris, telling him about his team and the supply helicopter that would be arriving shortly. Getting up after sending the message, he left the small room and walked at the fast pace towards the corridor into his room. A few soldiers stared at him when he passed, but just as he ignored them as usual. As he entered his room, he grabbed his tactical vest and checked the ammunition he had. At the moment he only had his knife, his Desert Eagle, and his Silver Ghost, since his rifle had been taken to Kendo to analyze the replicate. He only had a single magazine in his Desert Eagle, no extra mag, and 3 extra magazines in his Silver Ghost. In addition to that, he was already a weapon. He put his weapons in the proper holsters and prepared to get some supplies, a mixture of herbs, protein bars, which he ate, just in case, and some medical tools. The basics he took with him on every mission. He didn't know where or when Wesker would attack, but whatever his plan is, he had to be prepared as soon as possible. Lowering his head, Ghost looked at his duty watch and entered the map, which dotted flashed green, and the coordinates just above it. His team would probably arrive shortly and fly over the city, while William set out a helicopter with his equipment. The helicopter would land on the roof of the BSAA. Turning around, he shook his head slightly and put an earpiece in his ear, then tucked the small radio into his tactical vest, protected just below the vest's sturdy plates. Ghost, then sighing, left his room and walked down towards the corridors. Parker and Chris would probably be busy for a while, and they had to wait, not just for the helicopter, but for the information from both Ghost and his team, and BSAA itself. He hated that, waiting. He hated having to wait before he could do anything. Hated that he would have to act sooner or later. It usually meant the lives of being lost, structures being destroyed, and biological weapons being strengthened. Maybe he could help Parker with something. Hell, he'd be able to instruct the soldiers against bioweapons if necessary, so he wouldn't be stuck for waiting for something to happen. The place was busier than usual. Soldiers were running in different directions, shouting for members of their team while some of the captains were talking on their radios. Parker was probably already activated Protocol 9. In the distance, Ghost could hear some of the vehicles in motion. As he walked along, he found Sherry talking to a BSAA soldier whom he didn't recognize, since this soldier had his back to him. By his clothes, he was one of the soldiers in training. Before he could do anything else, he felt his cell phone vibrate and pick it up. Protocol 9 active. O'Brien's already contacted the monitoring team. The whole city's under surveillance, said Parker. Good, I've called in some of our athletes. The Army of Special Forces are also on the alert. God, I haven't heard back from DSO or USCSOCOM yet, but I've already sent the alert message, Chris said. My team is ready. The others are getting into position and some helicopters are ready. Should I get some of our combat trucks ready too? Jill asked. You can immobilize the men to take the trucks, but just put them on standby. We don't know where the attack will be, so helicopters will take priority. Ghost, got any predictions from your team? The rescue helicopters have already been mobilized along with my team's combat helicopter. Estimated time 13 minutes. A rescue helicopter will land on the roof loaded with some special supplies. I advise you to take some weapons. Great. I've been meaning to try out those sniper rifles of yours. What about Elia? Still no information on hold. Ghost, he heard Sherry's voice calling in, and he looked at her for a few moments, watching her slowly approach. "Purgatory for Ghost, come in." The agent's eyes widened slightly as he heard Elia's serious, hurried voice on his radio. "Ghost to Purgatory, over." "Ghost, listen. The planes Wesker use are very undetectable. They're in there," she practically shouted in his ear, and Ghost blinked a few times, confused, disoriented, feeling his whole body shiver and his whole heart starting to beat faster. "What?" "They're above the city." Ghost clicked his tongue and ran towards Sherry while changing the channel in an attempt to call for Chris. However, sirens beeped. Some explosions were coming from the sky. The agent, along with a few soldiers, leaned on the railing and looked up, gritting his teeth as he saw several missiles falling from the sky. A shower of explosions went off all over the city. The noise made no sense that it seemed like it was happening next to him. The entire building shook. Some vehicles were hit and other soldiers were injured, thrown far away from the explosion. Ghost took a few steps back when he saw the roof collapse where he was standing. The floors above him and below him were hit. Ghost fell onto the railing and ran his eyes around. Even though there were missiles, the explosions weren't that strong. The vehicles destroyed. The places hit on the building had a pattern. Those missiles weren't meant to hurt, but to delay. The agent looked up at the sky again, and he shook his head as he saw several containers being dropped towards the city. Spy planes, tactical helicopters, leaving the area shortly afterwards. "What the fuck was that?" he heard Parker shout over the radio. "We've got damage to the entire tower. North Arsenal is gone. Some helicopters have been hit," Jill said straight away. "The attack was to slow us down. Wesker wanted to buy time," Ghost said, gritting his teeth slightly as he shouted, hearing gunfire. Not too far away, probably just ahead of the BSAA. "We're picking up unknown combat trucks entering the city with some kind of gas. Northside, Parker, Jill," Chris said straight away, and Ghost almost changed the channel on his radio. "Elia, what's the situation?" he practically shouted, watching some lickers enter the courtyard. Sometimes he hated being right. "The northern and western parts of the city are under attack. DSO has already immobilized some teams, and the army's on his way. Mobilize the team to the northern area, to the helicopter to land 150 meters northwest of the BSAA base," he said, ending the call and walking briskly towards Sherry, who was looking at the whole thing in frightened surprise. She hadn't expected the attack to take place there, especially not like this. However, it was always been like this. All outbreaks came out of nowhere. "Are you alright?" he asked as she approached, making the girl look at him for a few moments. Yeah, I'm fine. It just happened, so how?" She blinked a few times, slightly disoriented, but already coming back to her senses. "No time to explain. Are you armed?" he asked, and she nodded. "Yes, but I only have my pistol," she replied. "That'll do. There's a rescue helicopter approaching. Claire isn't fully recovered yet. You two will need to get on the helicopter as soon as it arrives." Sherry gave him a sharp look, and eternally Ghost sighed. "Are you kidding me? You want us to run away from the middle of this?" she asked, somewhat frustrated, even a little annoyed. "I can take care of myself." "Geez, Sherry, we don't have time for this, and it's what's best for you. I did as you told me. I helped in any way I could, and now it's your turn to listen to me. This has nothing to do with any of you. You're civilians. Understand that for once," Ghost said. His tone was low but serious voice, and Sherry, despite softening features, still looked at him a little defiantly. "I understand, Ghost, but I know that I'm trained for my moments like this, so I can help my people." "Me, Claire, remember all those times I asked to help you? Well, now it's my turn, to help the people in situations like this. That's my job, Ghost," she said again, not backing down from his stare. Ghost ran a hand down his mask in irritation. When he heard a noise nearby on reflex, Sherry jumped back as a hunter tried to attack her. The girl raised her weapon, but Ghost was quicker and blasted the hunter's head off with his Desert Eagle, kicking the creature's body over the railing soon after. "Jesus Christ, you're a stubborn brat," he grumbled, shaking his head, and his eyes ran around. Lickers and hunters had entered the BSAA area, but they were quickly being eliminated. Great, it meant that they could take care of the infected in the city faster. "Yeah, well, it runs in the family," she said. and Ghost sighed slightly. Parker, Jill, send your teams to the city. 2 of you and Ghost are going to meet at the BSAA. He heard Chris on the radio, and Ghost looked around, observing some vehicles leaving some direction of the city. Roger that, Chris. Some of our arsenals have been hit. We also have wounded soldiers, Parker said. Ghost nodded for Sherry to accompany him before he started walking. Where's Claire? He asked, glancing at the girl who was walking beside him. Probably in her room downstairs. The last time I saw her, she was with Jill. He nodded and they both hurried down the stairs to the floor below. They walked through the lobby and out of the BSAA, where they could see some combat trucks being immobilized to various parts of the city. Like a small military army, all around were the bodies of hunters and lickers, as well as some creatures that looked like insects. What was worse is there were bodies around with people too, as well as wounded civilians being mobilized by the local medical team. Further on near the gates, where the combat vehicles were leaving, were Chris, Jill, and Claire, both Redfields arguing about something. Both Sherry and Ghost had ideas what it was. Chris, I can walk just fine. I'm not going to lie here and wait while the city goes into chaos. They heard Claire complain as they approached. Claire, you still need to rest. I'm not taking any more chances, not after everything. Chris, I don't even know what the hell is going on, and you're telling me to stay here and be guarded by soldiers? Christ, I'm not a child, Claire interrupted him, and Chris grumbled, shaking his head and running a hand through his short hair. Stubbornness really did run in the family. That attack was to distract us. Wesker's probably getting missiles ready, Ghost said as he approached, interrupting this small discussion. My team has already been mobilized to attack North and helicopter when it's arriving. They stared at him for a while, and Chris sighed and looked at Claire with this look of defeat. As he always said, he couldn't force her just to leave, no matter how much he wanted to. A team from my organization has gone after Albert. We can only hope we get something, Ghost said, noting the discontent of the anger Chris felt. Understandably, Wesker attacked his organization. That crazy son of a bitch. Little shit, Chris practically roared, running around and running a hand through his hair. The sound of gunfire echoed in the distance, the screams of not yet dead survivors echoing throughout the chaotic streets. Ghost looked at Sherry. She had a serious expression, but he could see what was hidden beneath that facade. She looked stricken, more than she wanted to let on. He also glanced at Claire. She found herself the same way, her feelings hidden by an angry expression mixed with frustration. His blue eyes darkened, whatever they wanted to or not. Everyone knew what this was. This situation, extremely similar to Raccoon. The only difference was that too much damage could be avoided and lives would be saved. But that wouldn't change anything. Something like this must never happen again, especially both women shouldn't have to go through something like that again. He clicked his tongue. The teams have already spread out across the city. The DSO and the army of USSOCOM have already been mobilized the agents in the field. But there are still areas of the city that need attention. They heard Parker approaching, a combat rifle in his hands. Attention all civilians. Stay in your homes and wait for the military to resolve the situation. If you find yourself in an unsafe situation, if possible, go to the nearest military or anti-bioterrorist unit. If not possible, head for the RSD stage as soon as possible. They heard the alarm going off, as well as the sound of approaching helicopter. It was about time. TerraSafe has called in for SAVE members to help with the rescue, to escort civilians. Sherry and I need to go help, Claire said, looking steadily at Chris, who just clucked his tongue. In the meantime, I think we can help with the bioweapons, Jill said, alternating her gaze between the small group and fixing her eyes at Ghost's end. Ghost? So, the helicopter's already here, he said, the sound of blades louder than before, and the helicopter appeared in the sky not far away. There are some special weapons. Take them. The ammo's limited, so use it wisely. Ghost said as the approaching helicopter began to descend further ahead, and then switched his gaze between Sherry and Claire. That goes for the both of you. If you're really going to stay and help, you need to arm yourselves and be careful, he said. He then turned towards the helicopter, now on the ground. The helicopter pilot climbed down and walked to the side of the vehicle, waiting for the agent to approach. "Ghost, sir," he greeted him. Ghost nodded as he did the same, recognizing the pilot. He was a part of William's team. He actually have worked with him, but only recognized him from having to see him a few times. "My name is Mike. William asked me to give you something," Mike said, turning around and pulling out a silver suitcase from inside the helicopter. Ghost arched an eyebrow and opened the case, muttering a brief was all he said inside. "He asked me to tell you that he knows how you feel about the hook shot, but he asked you to consider it. It would get you out of a tight spot," Mike said, closing now the empty suitcase and putting it back in the helicopter. "Of course," Ghost said warily. "That's a new model," he said, examining the silver hook shot. "Yes, the cable is even sturdier. It can support more weight. The hook shot can be thrown at speeds up to 1,000 kilometers per hour from a distance up to 90 meters. It's almost very advanced we have," he replied, and Ghost, sighing in defeat, put the object in the back of his belt. The agent then entered the helicopter and looked over some suitcases lying on the ground. He opened his case on the right and looked at the customized combat rifle. It was a variant made exclusive for his organization, Special Agents, used in reference to the MCX spear. It had the optical sight of 3x to 6x zoom. The magazine was extended to a capacity of 32 bullets. The rear grip and stock were made of more resistant material with a slightly thicker shape, providing the greater precision. On the inlonged barrel, made to cause more damage, there was a silencer. The ammunition was also special, designed to damage any type of biological weapons. Exoskeletons? No problem. Scales? Easy to penetrate. Flesh? Obliterated. "Good," he whispered to himself, turning around after picking up the suitcase. His eyes focused on Jill, approaching at a slightly hesitant pace. She didn't want to seem to know whether to go or wait outside. "You said you wanted to test our rifles," he said, dragging the case with the sniper rifle over the woman, who looked at the weapon with uncertain glare. The variant of the Arma Light AR-550. It maintained a constructive firepower of Barrett, with the explosion penetrating bullets, but it all did the same. It was designed to be lighter and easier to handle in combat. For Chris, a silver M4 WACE-47 with an extended magazine and a grenade launcher attached to under the barrel. It was a laser attached to the side with an optical sight. For both Claire and Sherry, an M4 carbine with variable 3x6 optical sights with under barrel to aid accuracy and 45 round magazine. The Glale with the platted barrel and 20 round magazine with the red optical sight. "Parker, do you want any?" he asked. When he saw that the man was already armed, Parker ran his eyes over the weapon. "You know, I'll go for the VEP R12 over there. A semi-automatic shotgun with 50 round magazine. Heavy but with extreme firepower in close combat. Fire ammunition, that stuff did a lot of damage." Ghost grabbed another mix of herbs and other medical supplies before getting out of the helicopter. He turned and signaled to Mike, who nodded in understanding. "Take these two to Terra Save and help rescue civilians. Follow instructions, theirs alone. No one else's, no matter what. Understand? You're not allowed to take off until they're both in the helicopter," Ghost said, and Mike nodded. "Understood, sir," Mike replied, and Ghost stared at him for a few moments, relaxing his posture slightly. "Good," he said, lightly tapping on the helicopter's window with his fingers. Mike nodded to Ghost, who just shook his head, and turning around, alternating his eyes between the two women closest to him. "You heard me. He's only gonna leave the moment you two are on board. Understand?" he asked, and the woman nodded, Claire already entering the helicopter, under the watchful eye of Chris, who just sighed. Sometimes he wished his sister would go back to being a teenager. At times she was too distant for his liking. "Talk to you on the radio then." "Thanks, Ghost," Sherry said, waving to him just before entering the helicopter. 4 of them stood there watching the vehicle rise and the helicopter disappear, along with the large buildings. "That was nice of you," Jill said after a few moments, and Ghost glanced at her. "They're not innocent civilians. They shouldn't be a part of this," he replied, turning to the small group and staring at Chris when he realized that he was staring at him. "This attack was meant to waste our time, so let's split up and cover as much ground as we can. These infected have already been released to execute. However, there are trucks scattered around the city spreading type of gas. I advise you to check it out. In the meantime, I'll focus on eliminating all biological weapons I can find," Ghost explained, then turned and walked away in a brisk pace. "Are you sure? I mean, if you need help, just call us on the radio," Parker said loudly, watching the agent walk away. "Roger that," Ghost replied, focusing his eyes on the motorcycle not far away. William watched as the wasteland below. His neutral eyes were hidden by his dark glasses. So that was the laboratory where Umbrella was hiding, where his brother was at the moment. No wonder they had remained hidden for so long. Within that level of technology, they could stay in the shadows for a few more years without being disturbed, and that was worrying. Ahead, he could see the entrance to the laboratory, along with some anti-aircraft defenses. "Missiles heading our way, beginning as of moments," the pilot said, firing a few decoy missiles. Then he maneuvered left and right, while taking a little more altitude. The explosions occurred in midair, and William just stared neutrally at the smoke rising and the wind hitting his face. "The helicopters can't go down. We have to jump. Get the equipment. We're doing the land assault," he said to his team, who nodded and prepared the equipment. After getting ready, William jumped out of the helicopter, watching the decoy missiles target the missiles in the air. His gaze analyzed by the entrance of the laboratory. The entrance gate appeared to be made of steel. The automatic lock opened only from the inside of the monitoring room. The door wasn't a problem, but it was a bit of distraction. If both members of Umbrella and Albert himself were aware that he was going to enter. William opened the parachute after a considerable height, and still in the air, threw some smoke bombs while being put on the mask of the face, similar to Hunk's mask. The smoke grenades in possession were different, thick and toxic with smoke. It masked their bodies, as if it's seen by heat vision. He was the first to jump, ignoring the explosions above him. With his rifle in hand, he ran to the side of the large steel door and left onto the underground laboratory. Watch as one of his team members placed an explosive gel around the door. After pressing the detonator button, a concentrated explosion occurred, throwing the steel door of the laboratory. However, despite the clear passage, no one moved. William just grabbed more of his smoke grenades and threw them into the lab. He knew the soldiers from Umbrella's security service there, waiting for them. He looked at his watch, making sure his location was exposed to Hunk and Ghost. They might only be human, just soldiers bred to fight, because they were good. To tell you the truth, they were better than good. They were great. If for some reason he hadn't managed to kill his brother, he could die without worrying too much, all because he was sure that 2 of them could do it in his place. Swallowing some saliva, William tugged at the sleeve of his military short, looking at the black veins that marked his white skin. He didn't have much time. Sighing, he looks at one of the members of his team and nods, entering the laboratory with the sole aim of ending up being his blood. "Attention intruders detected in front of the laboratory. Attention." The alarm was switched off after William activated the EMP suit, attached to his military clothing, a non-resistant electronic object that would be turned off or suffer interference. The group entered the laboratory, with William walking the center of his men taking the lead. The Umbrella soldiers were not on the ground. Like them, they were wearing masks. However, they couldn't see them approaching the thick smoke, which had made it relatively easy for William and his group to move on to the lab. They didn't shoot. They didn't need to waste any important ammunition when they could have used their knives. William picked up the machete from his sheath and shoulder and plunged the blade deep into the neck of one of the Umbrella men. He then turned to the side when he saw a briefly visible silhouette moving towards him and dodged a punch from another soldier. Stepping to the side, William punches the soldier in the face, followed by a kick to the leg, causing the umbrella soldier to kneel on his stricken leg and position himself behind the man. William breaks his neck in one swift movement. They continued down the corridor of the laboratory, arriving at the wing where three doors converge, one on the front, one to the left, and the final one up to the right. As they approached, they placed the explosives on the three doors and moved away. The doors exploded and William signaled for them to split up, three of them each for the door. William moved and accompanied by the other two scouts. He took lead, running his eyes quickly around the place until they reached the elevator area. They continued to decide to go down the stairs. As they descended, William shot a few other soldiers along the way that were continuing his way through the laboratory. They came in through a door and they could pass right through it. William had threw a hand grenade in the area ahead. The chances were high that the soldiers above the door were hiding or trying to kill him. The grenade exploded as they passed through the door quickly. 5 men, one was actually above the door, but fell to the ground after the grenade exploded. 2 soldiers were further forward, hiding behind 2 large cages that seemed to be infected by Cerberus. And the last 2 standing, with guns pointed at the door, were now disoriented by the grenade. William shot each of them 5 bullets, 5 bodies on the ground, quickly and simply continuing on his way afterwards. The surrounding doors slammed shut, stopping the group in their tracks. William forced his hearing in his surroundings. His skin prickled slightly as he felt his instincts alert him to something. The place that they were in, they were nothing important. He took a few steps forward, and that's when he noticed the echo of each footstep. He lowered his head and looked at the ground. It was hollow. William quickly jumped out of the floor opened up. He put his back to the wall and did the same time, pressed his leg against the other, managing to keep himself at the corner above. His team was quick to do the same, and the other corners of the wall, they just watched as the door returned to normal safe shortly afterwards. William headed for the nearest door, where his team member was already using the explosive gel. They had moved on to the next room. It was a long corridor with an office to the left with some exotic colored plants with some water tanks. Plants were probably used for bioterrorism or could very well have been used to find a cure for Albert, since he recognized some of them. They continued on their way until they came across a place decorated with cages containing trapped animals, dogs, rabbits, rats. Some of these animals grew to abnormally large sizes. Others were already infected, known as the Cerberus dogs. William signaled for the team to be quiet, and they walked slowly around the room. The computers in the corner were still on, despite suffering from interference. All things considered, they would say that the scientists only just had left.